Hi there. In this video, I would love to talk to you about boundaries, particularly boundaries for autistic and ADHD women. I'm Nikki Butler, also known as the Autistic Joyologist, and up until the point of my diagnosis of autism and ADHD in my mid-40s, I didn't have any boundaries in my life. That sounds really dramatic, but it's true. The first time anybody had asked me about boundaries or I'd given thought to it was when I was working with a coach post-diagnosis who asked me what my boundaries were, and I literally drew a blank. And from that point, I started to reflect and look back through childhood, adulthood, at the way I'd lived my life. And it became really apparent to me that I didn't just live my life on someone else's terms, I lived my life on everyone else's terms. And I always knew I was different. I always knew I didn't fit in. I struggled to understand how people seem to find, life skills so easy. And I would have said to you that I felt like everyone else had been handed a manual to life that I didn't get, or that I was looking through a pane of glass, a window, unable to get through and reach the people on the other side. I just didn't get it. I didn't feel like a part of anything. And I became really acutely aware of that from quite a young age. And then I throw in my recollection of school. Now, I talk quite a lot in other videos and blogs that I've written about something called the negative narrative. And I think it's worth mentioning here. So research has shown that ADHD children by the age of 12 have been exposed to around 20,000 additional pieces of negative feedback to children that are not ADHD. By the ages of 7 and 8, we've already established or believe that we're not good enough, we're not smart enough. And I remember struggling in school with things that other children seem to find really easy. And my school reports, which I still have, are littered with things like she needs to try harder. She can do it when she put her mind to it. She's clearly capable, but she can't be bothered. She's always daydreaming, looking out the window. Basically, try harder, do more, be better, were my school reports. And that narrative went through my whole life. College was harder than school because it took away some structure. So there were less hours in college, more time when I was supposed to be self-sufficient and working. I also experienced a horrific, traumatic incident when I was 18, which made my last year at college really difficult. It's probably something I'll talk about another time. University, even more so. My mind was blown with my peers that they could seemingly do very little work and walk away with good grades, whereas I was reading things over and over again and literally rewriting books, creating diagrams from words to stick up on posters around the walls, post-it notes inside cupboard doors. And I was fascinated that other people could seem to retain information and do really well, and I found it so difficult. So I was acutely aware of what I wasn't good at. That went on through my corporate life and fed into relationships and friendships and social interactions. So I'd always had this internal focus of the things I wasn't very good at, the things I struggled with. And the narrative was always to try more, do more, be better. And I never wanted people to see what I wasn't very good at or what I perceived as were my failings. And because I didn't feel like I fit in, I would run around doing whatever other people expected and wanted from me. And so I used to describe myself as this kind of like little puppy dog bounding around, and I could be whatever you wanted of me, and I would quickly be with people and work out what version of me you would want. What do you need me to do, be, all of that. And it was as if people were saying jump, and my response was how high. And it never once occurred to me that I could have boundaries in place or look after my own needs and wants. So life wasn't about living on someone else's terms. It was literally living on everyone else's terms. And that was exhausting and confusing because everybody wanted something different. I said yes to everything. I went to events I didn't want to go to. I'd say yes and then think, how can I get out of it? Even wishing I could be sick so I wouldn't have to go. And I'd take on more than I could cope with. I'd do more work. I would over-deliver. I was a perfectionist, yet had chronic imposter syndrome. Anything to make up for the fact the things that I felt I was poor at, I would do more and more of. And when a coach post-diagnosis said, what are your boundaries? I realised that I didn't have any. And then I looked at the implications and the consequences of not having boundaries in place. And that was even more shocking. You know, when I look at the amount of times I've put everybody else's needs before my own, that would often leave me feeling exhausted, burnt out, overwhelmed, sick even. I wouldn't do things that I wanted or needed to do because I was putting somebody else's needs above my own. And that's really where it began for me, to start to put boundaries in place of just learning to say no. I still find it really hard to say no to things. And if that's also you, this trick might help you. So I still have people in my life that make it very hard to say no. They don't always think no means no. So this is something I do. If I'm asked to do something or go somewhere that I either don't want to do or I don't know if I want to do it, I will say, I'm not sure, I need to check my diary, I'll come back to you later. And then I'll go back to them, usually on a text message, maybe a voice note. But I won't phone them because I know that these particular people have the ability to be very persuasive and to get me to do what they want. So I have a boundary in place where when I'm asked the thing, if I don't feel capable of saying no right away, I will come back to you. And then I'll go back to them in the way that feels good for me, so that my no can mean no and I don't feel the pressure. And something else that, is really helpful is understanding you can negotiate. Now, I didn't know I could negotiate boundaries or what was being asked of me, which is both hilarious and ironic, given that my background is law, contract law, and I spent over a decade negotiating contracts and managing teams whose jobs were to negotiate. I hadn't once thought I could negotiate what was being asked of me in my personal life. And that might look something like this. You know, you might be asked to go to dinner with a friend on a school night and it's right near their house, so you've got to travel 45 minutes each way. In the past, I would probably have felt the pressure to do that, or I'd have thought of an excuse why I couldn't go. It had never occurred to me that I could say to that person, could we meet halfway between? Or could we meet on a weekend when I haven't got to go to work the next day? And even little things like that for me now, I'm like, I really want to do the thing. I really want to meet my friend for dinner or for lunch, but I don't want to do it at the time and place that they've asked of me. And I would never have negotiated that or thought that I could. And now that freedom to say, I'd love to see you, but can we? And then change the location, the time, the date. So that's just something to maybe think about. What boundaries would make a huge difference to you in your life? It might be around work. You might feel that you need to have a boundary where you know that you can leave at 5 o'clock every evening and get home and have dinner with your kids. In which case, learning to say no or renegotiate deadlines for work would be really valuable to you to make sure you can still do the things that are important to you. It might be that you have to negotiate social expectations, or if you're helping out with friends, or if you really need some downtime to rest, or you have a hobby or an interest that you want to do. Being able to say no from time to time means that you're protecting your own interests and what you want and what you need. I really invite you to think about that. Like, what boundaries would make a huge difference to you in your life? Do you have boundaries already? How do they work for you? Love to hear your thoughts around this, because it really amuses me and also horrifies me that I got to my mid-40s without ever considering that I could have boundaries, let alone having them, or that I could negotiate what was being asked of me in any capacity. And I'd love to know what your experience on this are. Feel free to pop a comment, get in touch with me directly on the socials. You can email me, hello@autisticjoyologist.co.uk. I would love to hear from you. Have a great day and I will see you soon.